Under scrutiny, China launches antitrust investigations into US chipmaker Qualcomm. Game, set, match. What's being done to raise the popularity of tennis in Asia? Welcome to Asia Business Report. I'm SHARANJIT LEYL in Singapore. Now, China's government has launched an antitrust investigation into Qualcomm's operations on the mainland. China is the biggest market for the US chipmaker, and it's readying itself for the launch of commercial 4G mobile communications there, a sector where it owns important patents. The US firm has been told the substance of the investigation is confidential, but the move follows China's recent probes into foreign pharmaceutical firms and baby milk manufacturers. Well, earlier I spoke with China specialist Sean Rain and asked him what could possibly be the reason for this investigation.
I think there are really two things that China's government is trying to accomplish with this investigation. The first is it's trying to lower prices for consumers and, most importantly, for the telephone carriers themselves. So Qualcomm controls about 53% of the market in the chips. They do about 12.9 billion US dollars of revenue in China alone, accounting for about 49% of their overall revenue. But what's key is China Mobile, China's largest telecom carrier with about 650 million users. They control about 65% of the market. Right now does not pay any licensing to Qualcomm because they decided to use a homegrown technology. Now, China Mobile is about to launch a new LTE 4G network. And when they do that, they're going to have to start paying royalties to Qualcomm. So I think that this investigation is sort of a first part of a play to negotiate with Qualcomm to lower their prices, to make sure that the prices or the royalties to China Mobile are not too high, and thus to the end consumer. Because the government is trying to put price caps or push down prices on a number of sectors, as you mentioned, in healthcare too.
Right. But very briefly now, Sean, this is going to discourage potentially future foreign investment into China. So couldn't there be a potential downside?
Yeah, there is definitely a concern right now. The business environment is some of the worst I've seen amongst foreign businesses in the 16 years I've been in China. The government and also state media like CCTV have been really attacking a lot of foreign players. You know, Qualcomm here, they've been going after Starbucks, BMW in the last 6 months. So the concern is the government should rightly try to ensure that prices aren't too high and make products affordable for consumers. But China's no longer the other game in town. So they need to make sure that they don't scare foreign companies from wanting to invest here, because the economy is kind of weak. You're seeing that GDP growth is only going to come in around 7.6%. So, you know, the government has to be very cautious. China, again, is no longer the only game in town.
Sean Rain there speaking to me earlier. Now, in other news, the Philippines boxing hero Manny Pacquiao has said that all his domestic bank accounts have been frozen and he's having to borrow money to keep a promise he made to help the victims of Typhoon Haiyan. The news comes after the boxing star resurrected his career, defeating Brandon Rios at the weekend. Filipino authorities confirmed they had frozen all his domestic bank accounts over allegations of unpaid taxes. The tax commissioner says Mr. Pacquiao failed to submit the proper documents proving he paid taxes in the United States. That's a charge the boxer denies. Turning to corporate news now, Hewlett-Packard earned $29 billion in revenue for the company's fiscal fourth quarter. The PC maker said rising sales from its key enterprise group helped to offset shrinking sales at its personal computer business. And the head of the World Trade Organization has warned that global trade deal talks face collapse. Director General Roberto Azevedo's comments come after WTO members failed to agree on a text to be presented to trade ministers next week in Bali. A potential deal, the first since the WTO was formed, could add nearly $1 trillion to the world economy. And of course, for more on that and other business headlines from around the world, you can go to our website at bbc.com/business. Now, international football has a big following here in Asia, and getting to big games played on the other side of the world, though, is expensive when you factor in travel costs such as flights and accommodation. Well, it's a big game day in Brazil today, the Brazil Cup final, and millions will crowd around TV sets, even though they would much rather be watching the games live in the stadium. But simply, of course, they can't afford it. Continuing our series on money in your pocket, Julia Carneiro reports from Rio on the rising cost of living in Brazil, where even football's getting too expensive for ordinary people.
This is where Rio's football fans learn to cherish the sport from a young age. But the new Maracanã Stadium, entirely renovated for the World Cup, is expensive. Ticket prices for this week's Brazil Cup final started at over $100. For this Flamengo fan, it was just too much.
I'd like to bring my whole family here with me to watch the final, but there's no way I can afford to pay for everyone. So we came tonight for a less important match, but we'll have to watch the final on television.
Some improvements are being made for the World Cup and Olympics, but here in Rio, many people feel that this is bringing them more fame than fortune, especially when it comes to real estate prices.
Lídia Orphan grew up in Copacabana, but has been living in the Tabajaras favela for a year now. She pays $270 for a tiny studio here.
So this is my house.
Real estate prices in Rio have almost tripled since the city won the Olympic bid 6 years ago.
I had to move out because I had no money at all to do anything, to do anything else. I just started to work to pay my bills and to pay my house. And I just couldn't afford it. So I came to the favela so I could have more money to live my life, to have more quality of life.
But even here, rental prices are going up, with the pacification policy making Rio's favelas safer. After years of hyperinflation, Brazil has enjoyed a decade of stability. But prices of food and services are on the rise again. This restaurant specializes in the traditional feijoada, a stew made of black beans and meat. Beans are a staple food in Brazil, but its prices have gone up by 27% in a year. Brazilians now have better wages and more buying power, but the rising costs of living are swallowing up many of these gains. Julia Carneiro, BBC News, Rio de Janeiro.
And continuing with sports now, Hong Kong set to host its first international tennis tournament in more than a decade. Signs perhaps that the sport's commercial value is growing in Asia. The Women's Tennis Association will stage the new competition in September next year. And my colleague Rika Hizon met WTA chief Stacey Alister when she was in Singapore and asked her what big live events like these could mean for the popularity of tennis in Asia.
It just will create another catalyst for more Asians to take notice of tennis and to pick up a racket. And once you pick up the racket, then ultimately you'll either play for fun or you may get the interest to want to be able to play competitive. So we've been working with the CTA in China. We'll be working with the regional associations here to provide our knowledge on sports development, and together, using these live events, year-round promotion, having the athletes come to market, and then to inspire little girls and little boys that maybe they can one day be the next Serena Williams or Li Na.
Stacey, has the success of China's Li Na, who won the French Open Championships, helped in the popularity of tennis in Asia?
If we look at our broadcast coverage here in Asia, it's up over 100%. Our viewership is increased by over 60%. But the one stat that really just continues to blow me away is social media. Globally, the WTA has approximately 70 million fans following women's tennis. 40% of that 70 million come from China, and I truly believe that's the Li Na factor.
What will the season-ending championships mean commercially for Asia?
Well, look, this is business. Pro sports is all business. And our partners at the World Sport Group, Singapore Tourism Board, it's about a return on investment. So for STB, they're looking at tourism. And we'll be taking a 5-day tennis event that's currently being held in Istanbul, where our year-end championships are. But when we come to Singapore, we're going to transform the event into a 10 to 11-day international celebration, adding new content that will bring maybe new fans and different fans this will be happening in Singapore in 2014, just like STP has done with the Grand Prix.
The WTA's Stacey Alistair there. Very quick look at the Asian markets now, because they are all lower this Wednesday. Essentially, we're seeing the Nikkei being sold off, particularly exporters being sold off in the Nikkei, just because the yen is slightly stronger against the US dollar. And that's it for this edition of Asia Business Report. Thanks for watching.